Yesterday's German federal election had brought the CDU, Germany's conservatives, and their leader Friedrich Merz back to power. He will now be forming a coalition government to become the Chancellor of Germany. But what does all this mean for Germany, the future, and all of Europe? So, the center-right, right-wing CDU, this is our traditional conservative German party, they won 208 seats with 28.5% of the vote. Below them, in their best ever result, is the far-right neo-Nazi Alternative for Deutschland. This is led by Alice Weidel, the woman who has been recently endorsed by JD Vance and Elon Musk. They did incredibly well, doubling their vote share, and they're going to have 152 MPs in the Bundestag. We need to wrap our heads around the fact that the far right has done the best here in its entire post-World War II history. Below them, we have the SPD. They led the last coalition that collapsed. These are our traditional center-left Social Democratic Party. Their leader, Olaf Scholz, was remarkably unpopular with the public, and it is no surprise that their vote share suffered because of it. But they didn't do terribly and managed to kind of bounce back in the last few days. They managed to accrue 16.4% of the vote. And that's pretty good considering they were much lower in polling around a month ago. Below them, we have one of the first shocks of the night. The Grüne, the Greens, they looked like they were going to be down and out. They weren't going to get back into the Bundestag because there's a 5% threshold. But after a political crisis, they managed to bounce back big and managed to only lose a couple of percentage points off of their last election result, which was, mind you, one of their best ever. Die Linke, this is our amazing winner of the night if someone got expectations blown out of the water. A few weeks ago, if someone told you Die Linke was going to get this result, they would have laughed because they were polling to not get into the Bundestag. They've had a major shakeup over the last few years with one of their factions splitting off, their former party leader, and forming their own organization that they ran against them in this election. But guess what? They didn't qualify for the Bundestag, and shockingly, Die Linke did some of its best ever results, managed to get 64 members of the Bundestag. So this is really impressive, and not only that, it becomes more impressive when we start looking at the vote share among different age groups. Also, that party at the bottom, that's a minority party from Schleswig-Holstein. Now, one of the really interesting things is the vote split amongst first-time voters. So this isn't just young people, this is first-time voters of all ages. Right at the top, you see the left. That is an incredible amount. 27% of the new voters, first-time voters, were going towards them. Right below, the far right. And then we see those traditional parties, the CDU, the SPD, even the Greens, much lower than those two at the top. But honestly, look at that result. That's impressive. And that means their communications operation, all those individual influencers, all those people pumping out content across the social media, is yielding more and more people. And not only that, there is an appetite for that politics with a group of voters that was untapped until now. And I have to emphasize, the vote turnout was ridiculously high. This was the highest vote turnout since reunification of Germany. So this is big. 82% it's being reported. Most countries could not fathom that unless they had mandatory voting. And to really understand how big of a shift this is the vote map of who has the first place in every district from last year in 2019. And buckle up. Welcome to Germany in 2024, where the CDU has come back in a massive way, taking over huge regions of Germany. But keep in mind, smaller districts means more higher population. And that's why you see a lot of these left-wing and democratic parties in those city pockets. But more importantly, you see right here, this big blue far-right blob in the east. And this is not good. Also, if we zoom in right here, we can see that the left, they won Berlin. Look at that. Immediately after the result, Merz came out stating that he wanted independence for European defense from the US and also complained about US election manipulation on par with what is happening from the Russian Federation. This is a wild statement from someone who is an old school Atlanticist. But in reality, we have to understand we're in such a new world that Mr. Merz sounds more like Charles de Gaulle than anyone else. This election shows a shocking gender gap happening between how young people are voting. This is something that people online have noticed for a very long time, especially about young men. But women are overwhelmingly voting for progressive and left-wing parties. Again, look, Die Linke is doing incredibly, 34% of young women between 18 and 24. On the men's side, we see a shocking level of support for the far right, with 1 in 4 men voting for the AfD. This is not good, and it shows how effective they have been on their media operations in recruiting and converting young men into their political ideology. This is why situations like Andrew Tate having massive fan bases of young men across the world is very dangerous, and he is just a drop in the bucket of a massive manosphere which completely consumes the lives of young men and young people around the world. We also see that this is extending to other age groups of women and men, with men voting much more conservatively and women on the whole voting more left-wing in every age group almost. And this also extends to women as a whole, who vote more for left-wing parties than right-wing ones in this German election. Another question is, where is the AfD getting all this vote? And as we can see right here, so much of it is non-voters. It is people who are voting for the first time, breaking for the AfD. And they're also getting a lot of voters from the CDU and a lot of voters from the FDP, and a little bit less, but quite a good amount from the SPD, but a negligible amount compared to the amount of non-voters they are making vote for the first time. Just like we saw in Austria, just like we saw in the US, going after non-voters is the path forward for elections in this century. And the common wisdom of political scientists to not waste the massive amount of resources getting those people is wrong. It's equivocally wrong, and you have to always be working on getting people active in the democracy, because once they do, they will vote. And if it's only the far right going after them, well, that'll be a big problem. I think we also need to do some myth busting around this idea that the AfD is the party of youth. Like, yeah, they're doing okay with the youth, but that's like their third or fourth largest demographic. I mean, it's really like the party of 30 and 40-year-olds. And if you want to see a real party of the youth, look at Die Linke. That is a real share of the youth vote right there. And as we saw earlier, people are breaking towards them in a big way who are new voters. Not only that, they've had a massive influx of party members, tens of thousands of people joining in the last few weeks alone. So if you want to see some energy, this is effectively a brand new party that most of its membership now has just joined. And with a new energetic leadership, a lot can happen there. From the Green side, we see a much more even split. It's a little bit younger than that AfD one, but it is definitely not as wildly intense towards the youth as the Linke. And the poor SPD, well, they're the party of pensioners now and are really struggling with people under 60 years old. And if you're a political party and you need people to vote, it's very bad if a lot of them are aging out of voting. And where's all that SPD vote going? Well, I mean, it's going everywhere, but a lot of it went straight to the CDU, which means a lot of this vote is super swingy. Now the government needs to be formed, and that is going to be taking place immediately, because unfortunately the US has put a big time limit on European powers to be responding to his peace deal he's trying to hash out with Vladimir Putin. This is very bad, but it also means that whatever government's going to form is going to be forming fast. The first problem that Friedrich Merz is going to need to fix is the economy of Germany, and this will be fixed by the second problem, most likely, which is the defense of Europe. See, the building up of all of this defense infrastructure will innately create a huge amount of industrial jobs, and guess where those will mostly be? Yes, in Germany as well, because there's massive weapons manufacturers that are already based out of there. And with the amount of money and amount of things that need to be done and built, many startups and new firms will need to come into existence, as we have seen in Ukraine, to be able to fulfill the needs of a modern military and a modern buildup of modernization. But to get that, he's going to need to convince two other CDU politicians, Manfred Weber, head of the EPP, and the head of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, to change the debt rules in Europe as well. So not only will Germany need to change its constitution, Europe will need to change one of its major tenets blocking all deficit spending on the entire continent. And this will be massive, and will be having to happen in just the next weeks. Now, if you can do some engagement so people can see this and I can get paid, thank you very much. Have a great